this was the identity that I was given from birth, and with the best intentions given to me, with love given to me, to have a better life. And it was a scam, and it was based on a lie.
Welcome to And Then Everything Changed, a podcast about the pivotal moments in life and decisions that define us. I'm your host, Ronit Plank. Today, my guest is Limi Marie Bauer, who lives in Austria but has roots in the US and Brazil. She is currently working on a memoir about leaving the cult known as the Unification Church, run by Sun Myung Moon and his family. Her writing and research focus on cult survival, culture, power dynamics, and the psychology of language learning. Welcome, Limi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's very good to have you here, and I'm eager to dive in. I actually watched the YouTube video of your I Got Out story, your hashtag I Got Out story, which was moving. And I'm curious a little bit about how that came to be and when you wrote that piece and when you decided to put it up on YouTube.
The organization I Got Out is relatively new, and it gained a lot of popularity within the group the group of ex-Moonies that I belong to. And
yes, and I should interject that I was featured on I Got Out on their Instagram, so I'm newly familiar with them as well, and am in touch with one of their founders.
Yeah, and so there was somebody in the community suggested, hey, why don't we share our stories for this month? And it was one of those times where you sit down. I don't know if you've had this experience where you sit down and you write a story and it just comes rolling out of you. And
I think that's happened like once, once to me.
this one of those times for me, and it almost felt like it. As soon as I finished and sent it off, it almost felt like a betrayal, because it was like, oh gosh, this is the part that you don't say. You don't talk badly against this organization, even if you know that it's a terrible thing. There's a loyalty that is somehow still ingrained in me, and it really surprised me to send that off and say, this is so not what I want to belong to anymore. I got out of this, and yet to share that, I had a stomach ache and I was shaking.
Sure. Well, have you noticed that is a theme amongst people you've connected with, that, actually telling this story can be a little bit, can be so many different things, but must be very stressful.
Yeah. I mean, definitely seen by those within the group as being negative, or casting that it's almost like your loyalty is more important than who you are. And so when you speak out against it, then all of that is brought up. And I would say that a lot of people experience that.
I find one of the things that's fascinating to me about stories of people who got out of coercive groups or high control groups and cults, for me, this, as I interview more and more adults about this, is this sense of when you knew, when you first started to feel something was not right, and then what happened until you made a move to leave or to change, because that's a really enormous, monumental aspect of your life to change. And it seems to me, though it hasn't happened to me personally, and I want to hear your experience, it seems like it would be incredibly disruptive and jarring and a very vulnerable time. So can you were born into this, I can call it a cult, right?
Yes.
Yes. So you were born into this cult. Can you give just a little background about, maybe in broad strokes, how your parents met or got involved? I think they had an arranged marriage, right?
They did. And so for my parents, they were looking for their next steps, the next big thing. My father, he met the cult on the day that he arrived back from Vietnam, and he's from Brazil, and he became an American citizen while he was overseas, and And then to come back as a citizen and, as a veteran, rebuilding your life. And then here's this group offering world peace. And I think when he told me the story, the banner was "Find your true love," and he thought, okay, that's the way to go for me. I want a family. And
How long was he in Vietnam?
for 2.5 years.
And so you're saying that the church, the cult, was really set up right there in areas where they would find veterans?
I believe so. I mean, it was also
So smart.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they're set up in every downtown location where you might find a lot of tourists and people.
And this was in what city?
In San Francisco.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, go on, please.
And for my mom, she was big in the civil rights movement and had been working on Bobby Kennedy's presidential campaign. And she joined after his assassination the same year that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated as well. Mm-hmm. And so for her, it's like, where is the leader? Who will bring this nation back together, or any nation? And Sun Myung Moon, who ran the cult, he was promising really big things. He was promising world peace, and through one way was through international marriage and his matching ceremonies, where you get matched to somebody who you have possibly an enemy nation, and you can build world peace through one relationship at a time. Mm-hmm. And that was that was the
and it's funny because cults have been around forever, and but I mean this was about what decade that your dad, this was in the 70s or the late
60s, early 70s.
Mm-hmm. And so we know so much more about cultic movements and things like that now once you start looking. But this would have been sort of toward the beginning of this whole time period where cults and coercive groups were really on the rise. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I feel like it's even easier to be gullible or to believe, I shouldn't say gullible, but to believe that there is a possibility that what these church leaders are saying could happen.
Yeah. And I think, also, this organization especially has so many front groups and so many names that are associated with it that you don't even know this is who you're talking to until you're well into it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I remember speaking with Jen Kiaba, whose episode is going to air just a little bit before yours. And she mentioned that too. I had no idea about all the front groups. Can you name a few offhand just so listeners get a sense?
Yeah. So they like to name the organizations similar to other popular or well-known organizations, and the ones that are running right now, the name is Family Federation for World Peace and Unification. That's the sort of religious branch. And then you have the Universal Peace Federation, which is also connected to the United Nations, and they also own the Washington Times. They own UPI.
That's really, it's unnerving to find out, right? Because that means that there's a level of savvy there. They know, it almost makes me feel like the organization understands that if people knew who they really were, they wouldn't maybe engage as much.
I absolutely, because, you think you're joining a club or the on campus one is called Collegiate Association for the Research of Principles. It sounds very,
stuffy, stuffy and organized.
Exactly. Researching principles sounds decent. Doesn't sound like they'll be asking you to pick out a spouse for you anytime soon. So.
I love the sense of humor that people who get out of cults have. Like, you kind of have to be a little dark, I guess. I mean, okay, I realize that I've really dug in deep here with the organization, and we're not going to cover too much about the Unification Church because in Jen Kiaba's episode, we did cover that. So if anyone listening is interested in a little bit more of the tenets and what the Unification Church promised, they can listen to that episode. But this is the group that were known, in slang as the Moonies, which were featured in the movie from a long time ago, Airplane. So a lot of people in America got that kind of idea. So you are how many siblings do you have?
I have 2 younger sisters.
Okay. And so you grew up in what city? Was it San Francisco?
So I grew up in mostly in New York City, and then later on Long Island, but also in my early childhood between New York City, where the Moonies called owned still owns now the New Yorker Hotel. So I
Mm-hmm.
lived there with my family in and many families lived there. It was called the World Mission Department. And when I wasn't living with my parents because they would go on mission, then I was in a nursery in Westchester County.
Mm-hmm.
And
And so, do you recall any early memories of closeness with your family, with your
um,
parents?
I yes, but my early childhood memory is really fuzzy. Like
Mm-hmm.
difficult to it's really difficult for me to parse which memories are truly mine and which are stories that have been told to me so often that they feel real and feel like memories. So, yeah, I mean, I feel our family was really close knit between my mother and my sisters. We were like, I don't know, this girl power Amazonian kind of feel to it. And my
Mm-hmm.
dad was always in and out of the picture, partly because of their arranged marriage, which was often strained. Like their relationship was very challenging for the two of them, and
Mm-hmm.
so he found ways, or they found ways to live separately. And
Mm-hmm.
then they had standing in the community as a married couple and as an older couple within the community, and so they were given positions or missions as they would call them, and yet yeah, we weren't. She was basically a single mom
Mm. And
raising her
so,
kids.
I know that feeling. I think that you're talking about when you're with your parent, one of your parents, especially your mom, and you feel like you're with your sister and or
Mm,
sisters, and you're kind of this uninterrupted strength and blood bond
yeah.
and kind of single mind.
Hmm.
And so I'm wondering, at what point, or did this happen at all, you felt that you were lacking something, or something didn't feel good or nurturing? I mean, most children bump up against those times in their lives where things don't seem to be going their way and they can't get their way.
Hmm.
So, I mean, did something occur to you at a certain age that felt like this is different from other kids, or did you not have that perspective?
No, I knew it. And there was always this kind of feeling that we had this secret that we had to keep. And yeah, that we were not, it was built into this theology that
Mm-hmm.
because Moon was coming as the second coming of Christ, then he will be persecuted, all his followers will be, and we should expect that. And so if we share who we are with other people, then they will come back at us with, yeah, at minimum negativity and
Mm-hmm.
maximum death and prison and whatever. And so, and because Moon was imprisoned in the early 80s when I was a child, then that just became such a reality. And so it was always really difficult to challenge this idea because it was the religion that I was born into and brought up in.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
faith and this particular explanation were completely linked
Mm-hmm.
in my mother's mind and in the way that we were being raised. So I consider myself a very spiritual person. I still pray, and it's still, and now it's like, well, to whom? But at the time it was you, yeah, it was just completely linked. And so anytime I started to doubt this particular explanation, then
Mm-hmm.
the argument will come, well, we have to protect ourselves because this is in its early stages, or well, we're just trying to, you yeah, my mom, she would quote a line from Antigone, the Greek play: there's God and there are his priests, and they are not the same. And so
Mm-hmm.
don't be bogged down by any particular thing that you're being challenged by, because there's a bigger picture here. And
Mm-hmm.
that carried me for a really long time, all through my childhood, I would say.
Mm-hmm. How did that
Because, yeah.
suspicion or paranoia or protectiveness within your family and within the group for the outside world or of the
Hmm.
outside world bring you closer together or sow seeds of doubt in you?
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's a little bit of right, us against them, and then we have,
Which is
and
by design, right?
yeah, and also this sacred truth and this other thing we have the information that everybody needs, and that's also a cult tactic. But at the same time, what was happening was because this cult has its own holidays and traditions, and Korean culture and language is put at the center of it, then you almost get this nationalistic kind of it's the culture that's built up, and then you feel like when you meet other people who are members, we're all from the same culture, we're all from the same country, we've had the same experience. And so that was another way that we could very easily connect with each other, and just kind of put us a step away from other people that we were meeting
Right.
who weren't using
It was
the
like
same
a
language.
shorthand, right? You're all
Exactly.
from
Yeah.
the same tribe, basically.
Yes.
So then when did you start to feel a little nervous, worried, or concerned about what lay ahead for you in terms of arranged marriages?
Yeah, so that was it, because I watched my parents' marriage, which was rocky, and then eventually when I was about 17, then they divorced. And that was really a time where I began to step away from regularly participating in church activities, and rebelling in many ways. I started smoking, and just drawing lines in the sand. And yet it was there there was because I was in this nursery all through my early childhood, and then at 12 I went to a church school for a year, and so many of these teachings were this I were so much a part of me, and especially this idea of, if you don't marry in this way, then you will break God's heart. And I took that really seriously because I was a kid, and it's a very manipulative thing to do to a child. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Take your time.
Thanks. And so it was.
Do you feel? Do you feel? Is it? Do you feel the loss of that faith? Is it painful? The loss of that God or that spirituality?
No, right now it's just anger. I think that it's yeah. Or if it's a stage of grief, then it's an angry stage. And
Well, because I mean, are you talking about that idea of being a child and not having a choice?
right. Yeah, and not realizing how much power that you have because you're a child, or because, if you turn your back on this, then you lose your parents, or you lose your close friends, your community. And
Right,
so
and that also
I
is
could
by design.
yeah, and I could see the Moon family. I could see their children just being terrible people, and I could see that we were called blessed children, the children of these marriages, and we were not better people than anybody else. Like, that was clear to me, especially by the time I was 18, 19 years old. And so it just felt like, but at the same time, underneath it all, there was, I have to do this, I have to go through this marriage process, or I will let God down. And
And that's where it's really gets wound up, I think, from what I understand. The God, and then the leader of the organization or the cult. They're so wound up, especially because the leader is really inflated as the best conduit to God.
yeah.
So there must be a lot of fear involved too. And this is another point that I haven't touched on with you yet, which is your mom sounds like she was very smart. And she was would you say she was feminist?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think this is something a lot of people misunderstand. And I too have, in the work I've done on the podcast, constantly have to remember that just because you think logically about an issue doesn't mean that the person involved, the person who fell for the cult or the person who became addicted isn't a victim or isn't able to succumb to something like this. Here is your mom who seems really motivated. She worked for the Kennedy campaign. She's in this time in America where women are growing more powerful ostensibly, and yet she falls into this group.
Yeah. Yeah. She was headed to law school and she thought, you know what, this is a better way to serve the country. And
So interesting, right? Do you ever have you come to grips with that or come to an understanding of how that happened to her?
a little bit, only in just sort of getting to know how this happens to people, and also in watching my own process in trying to leave and then just get pulled back in. And one thing
Can
that
you
it,
talk a little bit about that? The
yeah.
process by which people do get intertwined? Because you mentioned that you've seen how people fall for it and get sucked up and stuff, but maybe that preceded your birth and everything, so maybe that's harder.
Well, it did, but also, I mean, it was the same tactics were used on me as well. So it's like this, you get inspired about some project or something that people are working on, and you get involved, and it's just a small thing, and then and then you volunteer more time, and then you go off for a training. And with this particular cult, then the trainings did have coercive tactics that really got into people's heads. So and they used that at the children's workshops too. So when we were teenagers, then they had the same kind of strategies and schedules to exhaust you so that you you just go with the flow. And then a lot of these teachings, even though they don't really make sense if you break them down, they seem to make sense when you're there. And then, yeah.
I was going to ask you, I think about these groups and I wonder how we'd all feel about them if they weren't coercing children and they weren't changing families' lives. If they were just a group of adults off somewhere doing something that weren't expecting to change the trajectories of families and generations, and if they weren't going to try to control who married whom, if it would be as, troublesome. What's your thought about that?
Just that there are so many other groups that are doing that. And it really, the charity run by a handful of people, to do one specific thing. There was a friend of our family. She was a nurse and she was in Haiti and she was making midwife kits for midwives. And so, and raising funds for that and putting these kits together. And it was one simple thing, and I think if people are really, and I find those kind of things very inspiring because they're doing genuine good without getting anybody's feeling involved, without asking them to take over their lives. It's a small thing, and so what motivates somebody to keep going and asking for more and pushing for more and taking more power? I mean, if I think about this, the Moon family starting as farmers in North Korea and now having, assets of $1 billion, and you're like, how did you accumulate within one lifetime? What were you up to? And that's been built on the backs of my family and all these other families and all these other people. And
How many people do you estimate have been involved or are currently involved?
oh, that's really difficult to say because this group has a revolving door, and there's people who come in and out, and they also still count you as a member even if you haven't been there 10 years. And so they just
So then, Limi, when your marriage started to loom on the horizon, can you talk a little bit about your age and what your thought process was and how you came to your decision?
Yeah. So, right. There was this ingrained belief that I need to go through this process, and so that was one part of the motivation, and then the other part was because I had spent a lot of time away from my family in my early childhood. I just didn't have any sense of of self-worth. So
Mm-hmm.
at 19, I make this decision. now,
Mm-hmm.
now I'm in my 40s, and I think 19 is super young.
So young.
and,
Mm-hmm.
and at
You
that
just wait
time, I
until
was
you're
like,
you're in your late 40s like me, and then you'll be like, wow, I'm still growing and learning so much.
exactly. I still feel like me. I don't feel any different at all. And so I was in 19. I was just completely um, uh, full of this idea that I was going to die an old maid unless I do this. Every boy that I was interested in rejected me. Also because I kind of looked for that type of relationship, and I just felt like this was my only hope. Or and also I was a sophomore in college, and I felt like if I don't do this now, then I'm never going to do it, and I feel like I need to fulfill this obligation. Um, and I don't really know. Yeah, I don't know. I wish I could tell 19-year-old me, you don't. But yeah, being somebody's wife and having a family was also just really part of the way that I was raised. Like this is something that you are going to do. And even though I had my mother and also my grandmother who was not part of the cult, saying get your education,
Yeah.
make sure that you can support yourself and at any stage in your life. And yeah, so yeah, it was a Thanksgiving weekend, and the wedding ceremony was at RFK Stadium. Featured
Oh, wow.
again at a football stadium, and the whole process is just it's very chaotic, and it doesn't actually take in account like these are actual people who are going
Mm-hmm.
through it. we
Mm-hmm.
we were matched. My husband and I were matched 3 weeks before, even though we had applied months before. We were matched just before, and then we only met 3 days before at in DC at the just before the
What
ceremony.
was your impression when you first met him?
Um, well, I was terrified, and I was like, I
I
mean,
mean,
he
most of
keeps
us, it's a little
seems,
intriguing, right?
you
Because
know,
none of us, it's a little bit of, it's of course really interesting to ask this question because I was never in this position.
yeah,
I know you're okay now. And
yeah.
so I'm so curious what it was like when you first met him and if you were relieved or even more worried.
Yeah, I mean, so on emotional level, I was like, it was almost like a vacuum had been opened, and I'm like, okay, this is my person, he's now in my heart, and then sort of practically and cynically looking at the situation, I was like, it was 1997, so I got his picture. And it was sent to me because I was up at college. It was sent to me. It was a copy and then faxed. And so when I met him for the first time, I thought, oh, you don't look like your picture because it was a copy of a fax. And so the features were slightly different,
Mm-hmm.
and that was kind of all I could focus on. And yeah, and there was all these activities that we needed to do at the same time. There was a workshop that we had to participate in, and the ceremony itself was a really it was a whole day event, and the wedding was just a side attraction in this World Sports and Cultural Festival where they had conferences and sports events and a concert and a mass wedding. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so did you begin living together right away?
No, because I was still in college, and he, as an Austrian, he had to do a year of military service. So he went to the military, and I was finishing school, and then he decided to go and study in Korea for a year, and then work somewhere, and all while I was finishing up college. And by the time I was graduating, our relationship was not going well at all, and we were
Yeah.
pretty much done because are from different countries, and I didn't speak hardly any German. I could say, Guten Tag.
Yeah.
His German was, and his English was, his English he'd learned in school. So it was just survival, whatever you needed to
Uh-huh.
pass a test. And then,
And then you had no time
yeah,
together, did you? I mean,
no,
had you, what
not
was the
really.
longest you'd been in the same place together?
3 weeks over a
Yeah.
summer break. And so all the rest was communicating phone or email, mostly email. And I'm an English major at that point, and so I'm writing these these letters, and he's writing these very short messages. And
Did you see the distance at
yeah,
that point as a blessing, or were you thinking, "Oh, well, this isn't going to work out, so I'm out of this"?
yeah, I saw it as a curse. I was like, this is because I really wanted to. I wanted to make it work. And when we were in the same place and we get on like a house on fire, like we really have fun together. And so,
Oh.
yeah, it was, and we were just young, and I don't know. I think anybody who's in a long distance relationship can think, wow, how do you even build one? When you're
Right.
not in the same not in the same country. And we had different upbringings within the cult where we had different priorities about things. And so, yeah, that was
So then how did
interesting
you
and
end up
surprising.
staying together?
Well, we broke up, and then I went back home after college. And when I was at home, there was an enormous amount of pressure from my family, and especially my mom, to reconcile this relationship and reconsider it. And I couldn't find a job, and so, or again, really young, you don't know how long it takes to look for a job. So I was pretty discouraged after a couple months, and then this job opportunity opened up within the cult, within it was a publishing company they have for character education materials, which is another front group. It was called the International Educational Foundation, and they made character education materials. And when I started working there, then the other people who were all members, they're like, "Where's your husband? Where's your husband?" And within a month, I was looking up, where is my husband? And trying to figure this
Was
out.
he still, was he like, was he into you at that point?
I mean, because I don't, yeah, it's hard to say because we just
Well,
had
it's
no
just so
communication.
interesting. Well,
Yeah.
because it seems so interesting to me. This is the part that kind of confuses me. It's just something to note is that you seem, you had this freedom that you could go to college and get
Yeah.
your degree and your education, and he was doing his thing.
Yeah.
And yet there's this old fashioned expectation about arranged marriage. So it's not like you were asked to just be in the house and pregnant or something like that. It sounds like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
wanted you to be productive enough community members to give back to the community or
Yeah.
to be able to have jobs,
And
right?
it
But
all has to do with the ideology that was being taught, because it's like the reason why there needs to be a Messiah is so you can have God's family, and then the children from these marriages, these blessed children, are of a different lineage. They're from God's lineage. And so if you don't continue the lineage, if you get married to somebody else, then who's from outside, then you've screwed it all up. And it's like, I mean, it's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. But
and your
that was
parents
that
too.
was the
It's
belief.
interesting
Yeah.
once again that your parents were urging you to continue in the marriage and make it work.
Yeah.
Did your mom approve of him, or was that not
Oh
even
yeah.
something that you could,
No,
yeah.
and he got along with everybody in my family. So that was another part of it. And she's like, "Look, he's really good people, and it's really hard to find a good man in this world." So that was her kind of message. And so you have one, better hold on to it. And
Okay, so then when did you well, I don't know how to address this. Like, when did you break from the church? When did you leave?
right, so much later. And it was really slow progression, because right, because this is my community and family and everything that I kind of understood about the way things go. And at the same point, it's like, I can stay in this bad relationship for a really long time, and this relationship with this faith, and on the local level, church services look like many other church services. I mean, they're also made to look that way, but and so there's a huge gap between the local members' experience and what's happening at the core of the cult. And so so we were living our lives and raising our kids, and it was really about, first we had moved to Austria. We were in the US, and we moved to Austria to settle down, and when my son started school. And for me, experiencing this church through the Austrian church, I didn't have the same relationships with people. We lived slightly away from many of the other, from where the large community is in Vienna. We live about 2 hours away, so we weren't involved in many of the church activities, and experiencing the language of the church, it didn't hit me in the same way when I was hearing it in German. And
It sounds like it almost gave you a little bit of an objective distance.
yes, exactly. And I was able to just experience it as a religious experience. And I was going to church, and I was exhausted when I came back, and I thought, I should feel inspired. So this isn't working for me.
What was that like for your husband? Because it was his language.
For him, it was the local community and the people that he had grown up with, and so it was those familial community ties, and his family, and who are also involved, and slowly with my children, and then when our third child was born, then I wasn't going at all anymore because I was at home with a baby, and and we decided at that point, or I said that I wasn't going to do the dedication ceremony that you do with newborn children with our third child, and I think that was like a big step. And for my husband and I, one of the reasons why we broke up during that time years before was because I didn't want to be involved in the church anymore, and he did, and so I was concerned that if I were to push against that again, because he was like, oh, it's fine, like where we are locally, it's okay. And when it was in September 2012, Moon passed away, and then his wife and children really started to compete for his spot. And as we watched the top kind of implode and fight against each other, bring each other to court, not being able to speak to each other, then he too was really ready to walk away from all of this, because if they say we are the true parents of all mankind, and yet I can't talk to my child without a lawyer, then living is not an example that you can follow at all. And even before that, it was clear that there was difficulties in that family, and so on. So, but really, it was about my children, because we had started the older ones, they were going to camp and workshops, and began talking the talk and coming back and saying, we are of a different lineage. We're not part of that. And that was where I stood up and I said, I can't, that's not a thing. There's no such thing.
Which is, it's kind of a full circle, because you made the decision to put your children first.
Yeah.
And that was something that's something that you still feel strongly about. It sounds like that was the triggering moment where you realized, or not moment, I shouldn't try to make it so literary, but that was,
but that's when it changed. And it's like, because, right. And even before that, it's true, because I had spent so much time in childcare facility, full time, like almost an orphanage, while my parents were doing this mission. Then for me as a mom, I thought, no, we're going to spend time together. And even if that means rearranging things, even if that means, yeah. And then to see them and their thoughts. And I knew that pulling them out of the community was going to be difficult for them, but it was so worth it to me because, yeah, because this is all just made up.
So what is your life like now in terms of faith and community and your marriage?
I have a really, oh, well, so many big questions.
I know, just a few. Faith, community, and your marriage.
My marriage is stronger because now we're not. It's interesting because we came together because we had this faith, and then, but now it's really just about us and what we want for our kids and for our lives. And as a parent, I feel like I've been able to cultivate these really good conversations with my kids and saying, hey, I don't know what I'm doing at this point. This is now uncharted territory. So let's just have a conversation and figure this out together. And my eldest son is 18 and then I have a child who's 16 and 9. And so I feel really good about that. And also because we were far away from the large church community, then over the last 12 years of living here, I've cultivated these friendships that were based not because we had this secret identity together or because we were special or different from other people, but because we genuinely like each other and we work together or we meet through the expat community or through our kids being in the same schools. And yeah, I think that these friendships, these genuine friendships are beautiful and enriching.
Did that take you any leap of faith or self-talk to come to a place where you felt you as a person were enough, you could trust this community and that people wanted to be friends with you, even though they weren't part of this safety net of people that you always knew?
Yeah, it was a lot of work and really good therapists along the way. And also, yeah, just having life sort of crash around me. Like I cannot, I can't hold people at a distance if I'm going to have, if I'm going to be able to survive here because we need each other. And so, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I was going to ask you, that kind of leads into one of my last questions for you, which is, well, I have 2 last questions, which who knows what will happen, where we'll go with this. But do you know, are you familiar or do you understand the deficits, if any, that you have because of being raised without your parents nearby, with these minders, or, do you have areas of connection that are difficult for you or that are extra sensitive for you because of what you missed with your own parents?
Yes. And I think it's really about, and what I've come to understand through therapy is that first year you learn your sense of basic trust. And for me, that was disturbed. And so it's been such a long journey. I am still working on it, just to trust that, just to trust, to trust that if I have a problem, someone will come, or, yeah.
That you're worth it or valuable enough to, right?
That there's a sense of value there. And I think that, but I have hope that it's possible to rebuild it, and through my relationships with my children, and I would say my husband too, showing up every day for me, for more than, we're together, right? We got together at 19 and 20, and now we're in our mid 40s. So it's
unbelievable, really. That's pretty miraculous. So are you in touch with your mom, your family? I don't know. Is your father still alive?
He is. And my mom passed away. And
I got that exactly wrong. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. And I think that was one of the reasons why I was also able to fully cut ties with the cult as well, because I didn't have her encouraging me to.
So now that you're on this journey and I think you're writing a memoir,
Yeah.
and you're sort of becoming, you're voicing your experience. Is there anything in particular, we covered a lot but is there anything you'd like people who don't quite understand what escaping from a cult is like, or people who enjoy learning about cults but don't have personal experience? Is there anything you want to set the record straight about, or you hope people understand?
Yeah, I hope people understand that that we are very human people who are trying our best to get out of a toxic, abusive relationship, and or spirituality that's part of it, and rebuilding this, especially as somebody who was born into it, which is really the only experience I can speak of, is that this was the identity that I was given from birth, and with the best intentions given to me, with love given to me, to have a better life. And it was a scam, and it was based on a lie, and to come up out of that is it's challenging, and it takes time, but I hope that people see other people like me, and are open to maybe being friends, because we have to build all these new friendships, or
Yeah.
maybe
What do your kids
listening to
think of
other
it? Our
stories.
kids have such opinions about our childhoods and the stories we tell them. Is it an open conversation in your family about where you started and where you are now?
Yeah, and I really want them to know that where I'm making choices that are different. I think many parents do that. I want you to have this that I didn't have, and sort of filling it in that way. My daughter, she refers it. She's very clear that, okay, she knows that it was a terrible childhood, and she'll mention that kind of casually, or no, yeah, but didn't you have a terrible childhood, or
Oh my goodness. Isn't that interesting how our experience and what shaped or broke us or made us becomes sort of like a one-liner or a
yeah, yeah,
shorthand in other people?
especially when it's our kids. It's like,
I know, it's unbelievable, isn't it? The other thing I was going to ask you, I'm newer to this community of people who got out and survivors because of my book, and I've suddenly reached out and been contacted by so many wonderful people and organizations who specialize in this and who have had firsthand experience. And so to me, this feels like a really growing, vital movement. We've got so much more. I feel like there's so many podcasts about it, and there's a lot of coverage on different shows. Do you feel that it's growing, or has it always been there and I just missed it?
no, it's definitely growing, and I think that coming out of 2020 has been
Yes.
really a time where a lot of people are saying, okay, that was true for me, starting my memoir during that year, and just feeling like, okay, I have to tell this story, because I don't want another person to have to go through this, or I would like to connect with other people who are coming up out of these things, and how are they doing it, and learning from each other. And there are enormously helpful resources that are so widely available right now, and I think that's amazing, because it certainly wasn't available before, or I didn't know where to find them.
Right. And this is where I feel that social media has been a really amazing net. Like, it's just been amazing to find people and reach out and learn more. And I mean, that's how we connected. I mean, we connected because of somebody else who said we need to connect. And I found them through social media. So it's pretty amazing. Limi, where can people find your work and what you're up to, and learn about your story some more?
Well, from my website, LimiMarieBauer.com, or they can connect with me on Twitter at Limi Bauer, or on Instagram at Writing with Limi.
Great. And we will I will make sure those links are in our posts about you and in the show notes too. And I'm really glad you and I were able to talk across the thousands and thousands of miles and the hour difference. And I'm so happy to meet you this way. I hope one day we can do this in person. It would be so lovely to actually see you in person and give you a hug. I'm really so impressed by who you are. And I'm so happy for your children that they have you as a mom. And, one of my nearest and dearest missions in life is really to make sure kids are okay. So I feel for what you went through and what you lost. And I'm so happy you're able to break that pattern for your own children. Thank you so much for being my guest.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure and an honor. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to And Then Everything Changed. For more on this episode, photos, and other episodes you might like, please visit atecpodcast.com. You can connect with me and learn more about episodes on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram also. Just search for my name, Ronit Plank, RONITPLANK, and you will find all the updates. If you like this podcast, please remember to subscribe and also rate and review so other people can find it. Thank you so much for listening.